All right, so ready to dive into a company that's basically like synonymous with memories, Kodak.
Yeah.
You've probably seen the iconic yellow boxes of film, you know, those Kodak moment commercials.
Okay, for sure.
But their story, it's more than just nostalgia. It's a lesson in how even these huge companies, these giants, can totally stumble. You sent us a bunch of articles about Kodak, so we're here to help you unpack this wild ride they had from, king of photography to cautionary tale. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's interesting that Kodak's success, like their early success, it kind of set them up for these later struggles. They were so good at what they did, like so dominant, that they almost couldn't see a world where film, wasn't the top dog.
So before we get into all that, like the downfall and everything, let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
What made Kodak so special in the first place? I mean, before them, photography was for, like, serious hobbyists, right?
Exactly, yeah. Back then, taking a picture, it was a whole complicated thing. Expensive, too. Bulky equipment, dark rooms, all those chemicals, not something most people could do easily.
Right, okay. And then Kodak comes in and just changes the game.
Right. Kodak's founder, George Eastman, he was like a visionary. He wanted anyone to be able to take pictures, and his slogan, you press the button, we do the rest, that was perfect. It captured his vision totally. They made the whole process easy and affordable, and suddenly, everyone was out there capturing Kodak moments.
Yeah, they really nailed the marketing there. They didn't just sell cameras, they sold a feeling, an experience. Like, they invented the whole idea of saving memories. And Kodak moment, that phrase, it really did become like a part of how we talk.
Absolutely. They were a cultural icon. They sponsored the Olympics, even had their cameras on the moon. They were everywhere. And this connection they had with people, this feeling that Kodak was part of your big life moments, it made their later mistakes even more shocking.
Okay, so let's talk about those missteps, specifically the digital revolution.
Okay.
It's kind of crazy to think that the very first digital camera was invented by a Kodak engineer, Steve Sasson, back in 1975.
Wow.
What was Kodak's reaction to that?
It's kind of funny now looking back. Sasson, he said that Kodak's leadership, they looked at his invention and were basically like, that's neat, but nobody wants to look at pictures on a TV. They were so focused on protecting their film business that they completely missed how big digital could be.
But they did try to make digital cameras eventually, right? They weren't completely oblivious.
They did, but by then, it was too little too late. They kind of messed around with digital while still trying to protect film. It's like a classic business school example of what not to do. It's called the innovator's dilemma. Basically, they were so good at what they were already doing that they couldn't get themselves to fully switch to the new thing, even though it would eventually, replace what they were doing.
So they were like scared of ruining their own success.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, that fear is exactly what led to them failing.
This is where I get a little lost. I mean, Kodak wasn't some tiny company.
Right.
They were huge. They had resources, smart engineers, a powerful brand. How could they miss such a big change?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
And to really understand it, we need to look closer at their internal culture, how they made decisions. Kodak wasn't just a company, it was like a whole world.
Right.
They had factories, labs, stores, all built around film.
So they had a lot to lose, but still, to just dismiss digital photos, it seems almost arrogant. Like they thought nothing could touch them.
Yeah, there was definitely some of that. Kodak was on top for so long that they developed a kind of blindness to change, They believed their own hype, maybe a little too much.
It's like their success, it backfired on them.
Yeah.
They were so busy protecting what they had that they couldn't see, like the new opportunities.
Right. It's what happens when a company gets too comfortable.
Yeah.
Too afraid to take risks.
Yeah.
Innovation, it needs some discomfort. A willingness to shake things up. Kodak, they lost that.
Okay, so this brings us to like the late 90s, early 2000s. Digital cameras are everywhere, and Kodak's trying to catch up.
Right.
But they did try to change, didn't they? Like, they released their own digital cameras, right?
They did, but even then it was hesitant, half-hearted. They were releasing digital cameras, but still putting tons of money into film. Like they were trying to do both. They even bought this photo sharing website, OPhoto, back in 2001.
Oh, wow.
That sounds crazy now, but back then they just saw it as a way to sell more prints. Not like a separate digital thing.
So they were still stuck in their old ways of thinking.
Exactly. They were trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And, they did okay with digital cameras. but it was never enough to make up for how fast film was dying.
It's wild how a company that was like the symbol of innovation could be so afraid of change. What were the conversations like inside Kodak back then? Yeah.
Were there people saying, hey, wake up, we need to go digital?
Oh, there were definitely people saying that, urging them to really go for it. But those voices, they got drowned out by the people who were stuck in the past. The ones who couldn't imagine a world without film. You gotta remember, Kodak wasn't just executives. There were thousands of people whose jobs depended on film. You know, changing to a whole new technology, that was scary for a lot of them.
So it wasn't just the leaders messing up. It was like a failure of imagination for the whole company.
Yeah, I think that's right. Kodak had the people, the money, even the technology. But they didn't have the will to really embrace the future. They were trapped.
Trapped by their own success.
Yeah, their own story.
It shows you that any company, no matter how big or successful, can be disrupted. If you're not willing to adapt to change, you'll end up like a dinosaur.
And that brings us to, you know, the end of Kodak's story. Their bankruptcy in 2012. It was sad, really, for a company that was such a big part of how we, you know, capture memories and share them.
But it's not just about failure. Right.
There are lessons we can learn from Kodak's mistakes.
Absolutely.
What can our listeners learn? Like, how can we make sure we don't become the next Kodak?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
And I think to answer it, we got to understand what really caused Kodak to fail.
Yeah.
It's not just about technology. It's about mindset. You got to be willing to challenge your own ideas, to be okay with some discomfort, and to realize that change, even though it's scary, is the only thing that stays the same.
So how can we actually do that?
Right.
How can we develop that mindset? What are like the concrete steps?
Well, first, I think it's about staying curious. Don't get complacent, even when things are good. You know?
Kodak, right.
Yeah.
They were on top for so long that they stopped being curious about anything outside their bubble.
Exactly. Curiosity, it's the cure for complacency. Read a lot, explore different industries, talk to people who are different from you. That's where new ideas come from.
It's like cross-training for your brain.
Yes.
You're getting exposed to all these new ways of thinking. Okay, what else?
Next, make it a habit to question your assumptions, especially the ones that have worked for you in the past. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Is it still true? What if the opposite was true? That kind of thinking can help you avoid getting stuck.
It's easy to fall into routines, you know, and to just see the world the same way all the time. We got to shake things up, challenge ourselves.
Exactly. And that brings me to my third point. Experiment. Don't be scared to try new things, even if they seem risky.
Yeah.
See failure as information, not a bad thing.
Like fail fast, fail often.
Yeah. But it's not about failing just to fail.
Right.
It's about creating a culture where it's okay to experiment, where failure is a chance to learn, not something to be ashamed of.
Kodak was so scared of failing that they killed their own creativity. You know, they were so focused on protecting what they had that they missed out on so many chances to innovate.
So it's not just about being open to new ideas. It's about creating an environment where those ideas can, actually grow. It's about building a culture of innovation, where people feel like they can take risks, think outside the box, and challenge how things are done. And that brings me to my last point, which is probably the most important. Leadership matters.
You said before that some people at Kodak saw digital coming and tried to push for change. Why weren't they listened to? Was it the leader's fault?
It was a lot of things, but yeah, leadership played a part. The people at the top, they set the mood for everyone else. You know, if they're not open to change, if they're not willing to challenge the status quo, then the rest of the company will follow.
So good ideas aren't enough. You need leaders who will support those ideas and build a culture where innovation can thrive.
Exactly. And that's the biggest lesson from Kodak. It's not just about technology, it's about people. It's about having the courage to lead, to adapt, and to embrace the future, even when you're not sure what it holds.
So we've talked about all the things Kodak did wrong and what we can learn from them. But let's, get practical here. You sent us these articles and you want some advice, right? Some actual things you can use. What can our listeners do to make sure they're adapting and, doing well in a world that's constantly changing?
We always think of innovation as these big dramatic shifts. But sometimes the most powerful changes, they start small.
Yeah.
Like with individual choices. It's about building habits that help you be agile and open to new things.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So what kind of habits? Give us the actionable stuff.
Okay, first, try to diversify your information diet. What I mean is read books and articles outside of your usual area. Listen to podcasts about stuff you might not normally be interested in. Talk to people with different backgrounds and viewpoints. That's often how innovation happens.
So it's like cross-training, but for your brain.
Yeah, exactly.
You're getting exposed to new ways of thinking. That's cool. What else?
Next, make it a habit to question what you believe, especially the things that have worked for you before. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Is it still true? What if the opposite was true? This can help you avoid getting complacent, stuck in your ways.
Yeah, it's so easy to just do the same things and think the same way. We need to shake things up a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my third point. Be okay with experimenting.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to try new things, even if they feel a little risky.
Right.
Think of failure as like data.
Yeah.
What worked, what didn't, what can you learn?
And that's where the company culture is important. It needs to be okay to try things and maybe fail without being punished. The leaders need to create that kind of environment.
Absolutely.
Eh.
Leaders need to encourage risk-taking and celebrate both successes and failures as chances to learn. And finally, never forget about your customers. Kodak messed up because they thought their customers would always be there, that their loyalty wouldn't change. But that's not how it works anymore.
Yeah, things change so fast.
Exactly.
People's needs and expectations are always evolving. Businesses need to keep up, get feedback, and adapt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are a few things you could do to be more adaptable and innovative. But in the end, it comes down to being okay with change. To see it not as a bad thing, but as a chance to grow.
Kodak's story really shows us that change is going to happen whether we like it or not. We can either fight it and lose, or we can go with it and create our own future. It's up to us.
It's interesting that Kodak's story, even though it's usually told as like a warning, it's not a complete tragedy.
Right.
They might not be the big photography company they once were, but they still exist. They adapted, they found new things to do, like printing and imaging technology. It shows that it's never too late to change, to reinvent yourself and find new ways to succeed.
It's really inspiring. It shows how resilient and innovative humans can be. So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this question. What's your Kodak moment? What are you holding on to that might be holding you back? What changes are you missing out on?
It's a good question to think about. Kodak's story reminds us that the future belongs to those who are open to new things, to learn from the past, and to keep adapting to our changing world.
That's a great way to put it. So that's it for our deep dive into the story of Kodak. Thanks for listening, everyone, and keep those minds working.